The strangest moments in life arrive without permission, and sometimes they change everything. I did not plan to attend the charity gala that night. In fact, I almost stayed home. My apartment was barely 600 square feet. My feet hurt from working a double shift at the bookstore, and the last thing I wanted was to spend an evening surrounded by wealthy strangers discussing things that felt very far away from my everyday life. But my friend had donated 2 tickets and convinced me to go. She said I needed one exciting night. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had listened to my first instinct and stayed on my couch with a cup of tea and a paperback novel. The ballroom occupied the top floor of one of the most luxurious hotels in Chicago. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen stars. Soft piano music floated through the air. Men wore tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Women moved across the polished floor in elegant gowns that seemed borrowed from another world. I felt completely out of place. My simple navy blue dress suddenly looked even simpler beneath the golden lights. I checked my reflection in a nearby mirror and told myself to relax. Nobody was paying attention to me anyway. At least that was what I believed. The room was crowded when I stepped away from the refreshment area and searched for a place to sit. Every table seemed occupied. Conversations blended together into a wall of polite laughter and expensive confidence. I spotted an empty chair near the center of the ballroom and quickly walked toward it before someone else claimed it. Without thinking twice, I sat down and exhaled in relief. Then something strange happened. The conversation around me stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. It was as if someone had pressed a button and muted the entire room. I looked up. Several people were staring. A woman holding a champagne glass froze halfway through a sentence. A waiter nearly missed a step. Across the room, heads turned toward my table. Confused, I glanced around and realized I was not sitting at an ordinary table. I was sitting at his table. Vincent Romano sat directly across from me. Even before I knew his name, I recognized the effect he had on the room. He looked to be in his early 40s. Dark hair, calm blue eyes, perfectly tailored black suit. He was not smiling, but he did not appear angry either. The people seated beside him seemed far more uncomfortable than he did. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. My heart began to race. "I am sorry," I said quickly. "I think I have the wrong table." I started to stand, embarrassed by whatever mistake I had clearly made. But Vincent lifted one hand slightly. Not to stop me. Not to command me. Simply to get my attention. "The chair is empty," he said calmly. "You are welcome to stay." The silence somehow became even heavier. I looked around again. Every face seemed shocked by his response. I did not understand why. To me, he was just a stranger offering basic courtesy. To everyone else, it felt like something much bigger. Slowly, I sat back down. The piano continued playing. Conversations cautiously resumed. But the atmosphere had changed. I could feel it. And as Vincent Romano quietly returned to his dinner, I had absolutely no idea that one accidental decision had just altered the course of both our lives. The rest of the evening should have been forgettable, but it was not. I remained seated at Vincent Romano's table because leaving suddenly felt more awkward than staying, and although I still did not fully understand why everyone seemed so fascinated by the situation, I could feel curious eyes drifting toward us throughout dinner. The strange thing was that Vincent himself appeared completely unaffected by the attention. While others measured every word carefully around him, he spoke with calm confidence, never raising his voice, never demanding attention, yet somehow commanding the room anyway. A server placed a plate in front of me, and for several minutes I focused entirely on my food, hoping the uncomfortable spotlight would eventually disappear. It did not. "You look like you would rather be anywhere else," Vincent said quietly. I looked up surprised. "Is it that obvious?" A faint smile appeared on his face. "Only to someone paying attention." That answer should not have made me nervous, but somehow it did. Not because he sounded threatening. Quite the opposite. There was something unusually sincere about the way he spoke. "I am not really a gala person," I admitted. "I work in a bookstore. Most of my evenings involve coffee, novels, and very little formal clothing." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "That sounds considerably more relaxing than this." I glanced around the ballroom. "Then why are you here?" For the first time he seemed amused. Several people nearby looked horrified that I had asked such a direct question. I only realized afterward that perhaps most people never question Vincent Romano. Obligation, he answered. Sometimes responsibility is not very entertaining. His honesty caught me off guard. I had expected a rehearsed response, something polished and distant. Instead, he sounded almost human. That realization made me relax. The conversation continued naturally after that. We talked about books, architecture, travel destinations we wanted to visit someday, and surprisingly, our shared appreciation for old buildings filled with history. Every few minutes I forgot who he was supposed to be. I forgot about the expensive suits, the silent stares, and the invisible influence surrounding him. He simply felt like a man having a conversation. Yet everyone else clearly saw something different. Whenever Vincent spoke, people listened carefully. Whenever he stood to greet someone, entire groups adjusted their posture. The effect fascinated me. Eventually, a woman seated nearby leaned toward me. "Do you know who he is?" she whispered. I shook my head. Her eyes widened. "Seriously?" Before she could continue, someone called her name and she moved away. I never received an explanation. Later in the evening, the charity auction began. Guests gathered near the stage while bidders competed for artwork, experiences, and donations supporting community programs. I found myself genuinely enjoying the event. For the first time all night, I stopped feeling out of place. At one point, I laughed at a joke Vincent made, and the expression on his face suggested he was equally surprised by how comfortable our conversation had become. Hours passed faster than expected. Eventually, the event drew to a close. Guests collected coats and prepared to leave. I thanked Vincent for allowing me to remain at the table despite my mistake. "You did not need permission," he replied. "You sat where you wanted to sit." The answer stayed with me. Outside the hotel, cool night air drifted through the city streets. Luxury cars lined the curb beneath glowing lights. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I glanced back one final time. Vincent stood near the entrance speaking with several guests. Then, unexpectedly, he looked directly at me. For a brief second, neither of us looked away. I smiled politely before turning toward the train station. What I did not know was that long after I disappeared into the crowd, Vincent Romano remained standing there, watching the direction I had gone, thinking about a woman who had accidentally interrupted his evening and somehow become the most interesting part of it. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the half-open blinds, casting soft lines across the living room where I sat sipping my coffee, my thoughts still lingering on the previous evening and the unexpectedly candid conversation with Vincent Romano. The city outside buzzed with its usual rhythm, but inside I felt a rare sense of calm, as if the brief interaction had altered the pace of my own day. I checked my phone for messages, none from him, but the thought of him remained present, as tangible as the steam rising from my mug. Deciding to embrace the day, I dressed casually in a light sweater and jeans, comfortable yet neat enough to run errands, and stepped outside, feeling the crisp air brush against my face. On the walk to the bookstore where I worked, I replayed snippets of our conversation in my mind, especially the way he had really listened, making observations and sharing thoughts with a directness that was both disarming and genuine. It was unlike any encounter I had previously experienced, and it left a lingering curiosity I could not ignore. The bookstore was quiet, the familiar scent of paper and coffee welcoming me as I entered. Greeting my coworkers, I immersed myself in sorting new arrivals, helping customers find titles they might not have otherwise discovered, and recommending stories with a kind of practiced ease that came from years of familiarity. Yet my mind wandered frequently to Vincent, wondering what he would think about the bookstore, whether he appreciated the quiet charm of such places, and how he approached simplicity amidst the opulence he inhabited. Around mid-morning, a young couple entered, seeking a gift for a relative, and as I guided them through selections, I realized the warmth of human connection in these small exchanges, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the gala where I had met Vincent. My day continued with a rhythm that felt ordinary yet tinged with a subtle excitement, the memory of last night adding a layer of depth to every encounter. In the afternoon, I ventured to a local cafe to grab a snack, sitting by the window and watching people pass, imagining their stories, wondering who they might be in the vast web of lives intersecting in the city. I reflected on my own reactions and how unusual it felt to meet someone like Vincent, Someone whose presence commanded attention without demanding it, whose words were both thoughtful and unpretentious, creating an energy that lingered long after he was gone. As the day moved toward evening, I returned home, feeling an odd mixture of anticipation and normalcy, the mundane tasks of laundry and tidying up blending seamlessly with the recollection of moments shared in conversation. I realized that this encounter had already begun to shape my perspective, making me consider how brief, unexpected meetings could carry significance far beyond what was immediately apparent. In quiet moments, I found myself replaying the subtle gestures, the small smiles, the ease with which we had connected, understanding that sometimes, life's unexpected intersections brought insights into human nature and the gentle power of presence. And through it all, the city continued its pulse outside my window, the ordinary and extraordinary intertwined in ways that suggested that even a single evening could ripple through the next day, leaving impressions that lingered in the most routine of moments. As evening approached, the golden light filtered through the tall windows, casting warm reflections across the polished wooden floor as I prepared the small living area for Vincent's unexpected visit, a quiet anticipation mingling with the normal rhythm of my evening chores. I arranged the cushions just so, brewed a pot of fragrant herbal tea, and let the soft hum of the city outside remind me that life continued even in moments of personal significance. When the doorbell rang, I felt a flutter of excitement, my mind racing with thoughts of our earlier encounter and the intriguing curiosity he inspired. Yet I maintained my composure, greeting him with a calm smile that concealed the subtle thrill of seeing him again. Vincent entered, exuding an effortless presence, his posture confident yet relaxed, as he surveyed the room with an appreciative glance, a faint smile acknowledging the care I had taken. We settled into the plush chairs facing each other, the conversation flowing naturally from casual remarks about the day into more personal reflections, his voice measured yet warm, drawing me in as he shared observations that were at once insightful and unexpectedly vulnerable. I noticed the way his eyes held mine when he spoke, a depth of attention that made ordinary words feel significant, as if each sentence carried a weight beyond its surface meaning. The evening unfolded with a gentle rhythm, punctuated by shared laughter over trivial stories, the warmth of tea between us, and the quiet comfort of knowing that this encounter was more than a mere social visit. At one point, he commented on the books lining the shelves, his curiosity genuine, and I felt a subtle pride in guiding him through selections that had always held personal significance, explaining the reasons each story resonated with me, and finding delight in his thoughtful responses. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle against the deepening twilight, a backdrop to the intimacy of the room and the quiet evolution of our connection. The discussion shifted to shared experiences and small, revealing anecdotes from our pasts, moments that built a bridge between our worlds, revealing layers that neither of us had expected to share so soon. In these hours, I recognized the power of presence and attention, how the simplest gestures, a laugh, a pointed comment, a careful choice of words, could weave an atmosphere of trust and subtle intrigue. As the visit drew to a close, there was a lingering sense of anticipation, a mutual recognition that this evening had altered the tone of our acquaintance, setting the stage for encounters yet to come, leaving an imprint of warmth, connection, and the quiet thrill of discovering someone whose presence could reshape ordinary moments into memories that lingered far longer than anticipated. The morning sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, casting a warm glow over the cozy living space as I moved quietly around, arranging papers and straightening the small collection of photographs on the side table, each one a quiet testament to moments of everyday life that suddenly seemed more significant knowing Vincent would be visiting. I adjusted a chair so it faced the window, allowing the light to fall gently on the seating area, creating a sense of calm order in contrast to the subtle excitement that fluttered in my chest. When the doorbell rang, I felt a familiar rush of anticipation mixed with the composure I had cultivated over months of careful interactions, opening the door to find Vincent standing with an easy, controlled smile, his posture confident, yet his eyes reflected a warmth that invited trust, as if the air between us could carry conversation effortlessly. We exchanged polite greetings, his voice measured yet filled with a quiet intensity that made ordinary dialogue feel layered and significant, and we moved to the chairs as the soft hum of the city outside framed our presence in the room. Conversation unfolded seamlessly, touching on light anecdotes, observations about the city, and fleeting personal reflections, each moment punctuated by subtle gestures of attentiveness and gentle humor. weaving a shared understanding that neither of us needed to rush or force. I noticed the meticulous care he took when responding, how each word seemed considered, and I felt drawn into the rhythm of our exchange, appreciating the unspoken dialogue of glances, small smiles, and the easy ebb and flow of attention that made the ordinary extraordinary. At one point we discussed the nuances of our favorite books and films, our discussion a dance of perspectives and insight, each comment revealing a dimension of personality and thought that deepened the connection forming in the space between us. The afternoon progressed with a comforting cadence, the subtle aroma of brewed coffee mingling with laughter and shared stories, creating an atmosphere of familiarity and intrigue, where the presence of another person transformed simple gestures into meaningful exchanges, each moment layered with quiet anticipation and the gentle excitement of possibilities. The room seemed to expand with the dialogue, the sunlight now angled lower, casting elongated shadows that mirrored the unfolding depth of our interaction, and as our conversation touched upon personal aspirations and fleeting memories, there was a profound sense of ease that accompanied the natural flow of engagement, a connection that balanced curiosity, respect, and subtle emotional resonance. As the visit neared its close, the warmth lingered, a mixture of reflective thought and the subtle thrill of shared experience, leaving a quiet impression of connection that promised further discovery, the ordinary space transformed by attention, presence, and the shared unfolding of dialogue into a moment that neither of us would soon forget, a gentle prelude to the layers of understanding and mutual intrigue that would continue to develop in the days to follow. The days that followed settled into a rhythm neither of us had expected, yet both seemed quietly unwilling to interrupt. Every morning I opened the bookstore at 8 o'clock, arranged displays, recommended novels to regular customers, and returned home believing I would spend the evening alone, yet somehow Vincent continued appearing in unexpected corners of my life. It never felt planned. That was what made it so strange. One Thursday afternoon, a light rain drifted across the city, turning sidewalks silver beneath the overcast sky. Business was slow and I was organizing a display of classic American literature when the bell above the bookstore door chimed softly. I glanced up and froze. Vincent stood near the entrance holding a closed umbrella, dressed in a charcoal coat that looked far too expensive for a neighborhood bookstore. Several customers immediately recognized him. I could see it in the way they exchanged glances. Yet Vincent ignored the attention completely. His eyes found mine instead. "I hope I am not interrupting," he said. "Only if you are here to reorganize the entire store," I replied. A faint smile appeared on his face. "I make no promises." For the next hour something remarkable happened. He simply stayed. He wandered through shelves, examined titles, and asked questions about books he had never read. The powerful, mysterious man everyone seemed intimidated by spent 20 minutes debating whether a particular novel deserved its reputation. More surprisingly, he listened when I disagreed with him. At one point, an elderly customer approached the register looking confused about a gift for her grandson. Before I could step forward, Vincent gently asked about the boy's interests and helped narrow the choices. The customer left smiling. I stood there watching, momentarily speechless. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "You are not what I expected." "Neither are you." The answer lingered between us. Later, after my shift ended, we walked through the rain-covered streets together. The city glowed beneath reflections of traffic lights and storefront windows. People hurried past carrying umbrellas while we moved more slowly, neither in a rush to reach any destination. For the first time, the conversation turned personal. He asked about my childhood. I told him about growing up in a small town, about library visits with my father, and about the dream that eventually brought me to Chicago. In return, Vincent shared fragments of his own story. Not everything. Just enough. Enough for me to understand that success had not arrived easily. Enough for me to see that behind the confidence existed responsibilities most people never noticed. We eventually stopped at a small cafe overlooking the river. Rain tapped softly against the windows while warm light filled the room. For nearly 2 hours we talked without checking the time. There were no dramatic moments. No grand declarations. Just conversation. Honest, effortless conversation. Yet somehow that felt more significant than anything else. As evening settled over the city, Vincent walked me to my apartment building. We stood beneath the awning while rain continued falling around us. "You know," I said, "most people seem terrified of you." He laughed quietly. "And you are not?" I considered the question carefully. No, for a moment he simply looked at me. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Not amusement. Something deeper. Something thoughtful. Then he nodded once. That might be the most unusual thing anyone has ever said to me. And as I watched him disappear into the rainy evening, I had the unmistakable feeling that neither of our lives would ever return to being quite as simple as they had been before. The morning sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, painting stripes across the hardwood floor as I sat quietly sipping my coffee, reflecting on the events that had reshaped my sense of normal. Vincent's presence had become a subtle rhythm in my life, an unpredictable yet comforting constant, and today I sensed something different in the air, a shift that carried the weight of unspoken possibilities. He had texted the night before, asking if I could meet him at a small riverside gallery that was hosting an exhibit on local art, promising no interruptions and only conversation. When I arrived, he was already there, leaning casually against the wall with a relaxed posture that belied the intensity that usually surrounded him, his eyes scanning the room until they found me, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. As I approached, he straightened and greeted me with a warmth that contrasted sharply with the icy persona the world attributed to him. He led me through the exhibits, pointing out pieces that caught his attention, and I listened, intrigued by the way he spoke about art, not as a display of wealth or power but with genuine curiosity and a nuanced appreciation. We moved from painting to sculpture, occasionally pausing to discuss the themes and techniques, and I noticed how people around us seemed to give him space, whispering and stealing glances, yet he remained focused entirely on the conversation, as though nothing else existed beyond our shared moment. At one point he asked my opinion about a series of abstract paintings, leaning slightly closer, and I explained my interpretations with careful thought, noticing how he absorbed every word, nodding and occasionally asking questions that made me rethink my own observations. The subtle camaraderie built a bridge of understanding that felt fragile yet exhilarating, and for the first time, I sensed that Vincent was willingly lowering the walls he always carried, revealing glimpses of vulnerability. Later, we stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city streets, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of rain from the night before, and he shared fragments of his past, stories that were not boastful but revealing, moments of decisions and regrets that had shaped him. I responded with honesty, sharing thoughts and experiences I had kept private, and our dialogue wove an invisible thread of connection that neither of us had anticipated, but both embraced. The sun climbed higher, casting golden reflections across the gallery floor, and a quiet understanding settled between us, a sense that we had crossed a threshold into a space of trust and curiosity, where the ordinary and extraordinary intertwined. As we left, our steps in sync, we did not speak of the future, yet the weight of potential lingered in the space between words, a promise unspoken, a bond quietly acknowledged, hinting that whatever paths lay ahead, this day marked a turning point in the rhythm of our intertwined lives, a moment that neither of us would forget, and one that would shape the unfolding story of trust, understanding, and the delicate complexity of human connection. The following week arrived wrapped in clear skies and the kind of summer sunlight that made the city feel softer than usual, and yet beneath the calm surface of my routine, I could sense that something important was changing. The bookstore remained busy, customers drifting between shelves and asking for recommendations, but my attention wandered more often than I cared to admit. Every familiar corner seemed touched by memories of recent conversations, quiet walks, and unexpected moments shared with Vincent. What surprised me most was not how frequently I thought about him, but how natural it felt. One afternoon, as I finished helping a customer choose a collection of classic novels, my phone vibrated with a message. It was from Vincent. The note was simple. There was a community literacy fundraiser being held that evening, and he wanted to know if I would attend with him. I stared at the screen for several seconds before smiling. Hours later, I arrived at the historic theater hosting the event. Warm lights illuminated the entrance, and guests filled the lobby with conversation and laughter. When Vincent appeared beside me, dressed in a dark suit that somehow made him look both powerful and approachable, I noticed something unusual. He seemed relaxed. Not the composed public figure everyone expected, but simply himself. Throughout the evening, we moved through the event together. We spoke with teachers, volunteers, donors, and students. I watched him listen carefully to people who had nothing to offer him professionally, giving each conversation his full attention. More than once, I caught myself studying him when he was not looking. The reputation that followed him everywhere seemed increasingly disconnected from the person I had come to know. Later, during a quiet moment between presentations, we stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city. The skyline stretched across the horizon beneath a fading sunset, and traffic lights glittered like tiny stars below. For several moments neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable, meaningful. "You have changed something," Vincent finally said. I turned toward him. "What do you mean?" He rested his hands lightly on the railing. For a long time every room felt exactly the same. Every conversation had a purpose. Every relationship came with expectations. His gaze remained fixed on the skyline. "Then you accidentally sat at the wrong table." I laughed softly. "That was definitely not part of my life plan." He smiled. "Mine either." The breeze moved gently across the balcony, carrying the sounds of the city upward. For the first time, I understood that our connection had become significant to him in ways he rarely admitted. The realization was both exciting and unexpectedly emotional. We returned to the fundraiser and spent the rest of the evening together, but something had shifted. There was greater honesty now, less caution. By the time the event ended, the streets below were glowing beneath the first lights of evening. As we walked toward the waiting cars outside the theater, I found myself reflecting on how improbable everything felt. A crowded ballroom, an empty chair, a conversation that should have lasted only a few minutes. Instead, it had become something neither of us could ignore. Standing beneath the city lights, I realized that sometimes the most important changes begin with mistakes, and sometimes the people who alter your future are the ones you never expected to meet at all. The weeks that followed carried a quiet certainty neither of us felt the need to define. Life did not suddenly become perfect. The bookstore still opened every morning at 8 o'clock. Customers still wandered between shelves searching for stories that might help them escape their own lives for a few hours. The city still moved with the same restless energy outside my apartment window. Yet something fundamental had changed. I noticed it in the small moments. In the messages that arrived unexpectedly during lunch breaks. In the conversations that stretched long after either of us had run out of practical things to discuss. In the growing realization that Vincent had become part of my everyday thoughts without either of us intending it. One Saturday afternoon, nearly 2 months after the charity gala, Vincent invited me to a community center on the south side of the city. He refused to explain why. "Just trust me," he said. The moment I arrived, I understood. Children filled the building. New books lined freshly installed shelves. Reading corners occupied spaces that had previously sat empty. Teachers and volunteers moved through the rooms helping students explore stories and activities. The entire project focused on literacy programs and educational resources. I stood there speechless. "You did this?" I asked. Vincent shook his head. "No. We did this." I turned toward him confused. He smiled. "You are the one who reminded me that influence means very little if it only serves yourself." For several seconds I could not speak. The words settled somewhere deep inside me, because that was the moment I finally understood what had truly happened between us. People assumed I had entered his world and changed it. The truth was far more complicated. He had changed mine too. Not through wealth, not through power, through attention, through respect, through the simple act of treating my opinions as if they mattered. The afternoon passed surrounded by laughter, conversations, and excited children discovering new books. Watching Vincent interact with families and educators felt strangely emotional. He looked comfortable there. Authentic. Like a man who had finally found a purpose larger than expectations and appearances. Later, as the event concluded, we stepped outside into the fading sunlight. The city skyline stretched across the horizon, glowing gold beneath the evening sky. We stood quietly for a moment, taking it all in. "Do you ever think about that night?" I asked. Vincent laughed softly. "The night you stole my chair? It was not your chair. That is still your defense?" I smiled. "Absolutely." He shook his head, still smiling. Then his expression softened. "I think about it all the time." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. We stood there as the sun continued sinking beyond the buildings. For the first time since we met, there was no uncertainty left. No invisible distance. No need to pretend our lives had not become deeply connected. Looking back, it would have been easy to call everything coincidence. An empty seat. A crowded ballroom. A conversation between strangers. But standing beside Vincent beneath the evening sky, I realized some moments arrive disguised as accidents when they are really opportunities. Opportunities to grow. To change. To become someone better than you were before. And sometimes the most extraordinary chapter of your life begins with a mistake so small, you almost do not notice it happening at all.